and welcome to Education and Training.
The following workshop has been designed to enhance your understanding of critical thinking. Officers and soldiers are increasingly placed in demanding and complex situations where they are required to think critically in order to solve problems and often have difficult decisions to make. Critical thinking skills are a vital component of the warrior and thinker ethos. Critical thinking allows us to better identify situations where something is wrong or when a new direction may be required, or identify situations where there is uncertainty and ambiguity, or to apply original and indirect approaches to solving problems. By understanding how people think and make decisions, military errors can be avoided. The importance of effective decision making is highlighted in our doctrine. We cannot make effective decisions without effective thinking. In essence, if we get this right, we can create the strategic edge. Our adversaries avoid confrontation with our strengths, so we will no longer benefit as much from having the technological advantage. The way we will defeat our adversaries in the future will be by being smarter. The following workshop has two activities. Activity 1 will provide a refresher on the main components of critical thinking, and Activity 2 will provide an opportunity to discuss errors in our thinking such as logical fallacies and cognitive biases.
The human brain is spectacular. At any point in time, about 10 or 11 million single bits of information hit our brain. However, we are not able to understand all of them. In fact, only 50 of them can actually be understood, and about only 7 of them being remembered in the short term. So you have this information that you somehow need to filter. If we couldn't filter, we wouldn't survive. Given that we have those filters that enable us to very quickly assess an information, very quickly to make a judgment on a situation, it also leads to us making the wrong judgments, too quick judgments. There are a couple of experiments in neuroscience that show us that our brain does not deliver to us the type of information that best reflects reality all the time. So being shown only a portrait of people in a very, very quick sequence, we are able to make a choice, a decision, a judgment within less than a second of whether we trust this person or not. We might feel very uncomfortable articulating that this initial gut feel reaction is there, but it's in all of us. We can see biases in all types of ways that we interact with people, given those quick initial gut feel reactions that we have. Now, the depth of those biases is something we can actually measure. There's something called implicit association testing, which takes one of those biases and tests via response time how quickly people are able to respond to or against it. And the outcomes have been shown to influence people's recruiting decision. Let me give you one example on how these biases matter for female leadership. If we have a certain stereotype, a certain idea of what a female should look and behave like, we enjoy to see kindness, we enjoy to see humbleness, we enjoy someone who would rather ask others for opinion before asserting theirs, or better even asking questions before asserting an opinion. Now, this is what we like because it's somewhat congruent with a stereotype that we have. However, this is not what we see a leader behave like. So while people might say, oh yes, she's fantastic, she's such a nice person, the answer to the question, do you want her to be your boss, will be maybe rather not. So some women have chosen to do the exact opposite. They become assertive. They are the first one to speak up in a meeting. They are the ones that would actively negotiate for their salary. And what research shows is that those women unfortunately do not get the same performance evaluations as male counterparts with similar behavior. What we see here is called a double bind situation. So what to do? We heard we've got this fantastic brain that is able to help us in a split of a second to make important choices. At the same time, though, we know that it can be misleading. The answer lies in something that the Nobel Prize winner Kahneman introduced in his Thinking Fast and Slow book. What we've done so far is we focused on thinking fast. We focused on our gut feel. We focused on our biases. Now we just need to start and think slow. So thinking slow means to have introductory sessions and just articulate that, yes, the human brain is biased, therefore we are biased. And to give your organization a vocabulary to actually talk about these things. Because if you do not have the words to speak about them, it's extremely hard to bring them up to the surface. So something about awareness, about the vocabulary, and then about identifying concretely what those biases are that you have, that your organization is carrying. And then you can start with countermeasures against it. One very concrete example is the mini-me bias. What is that? Given the fact that I have been successful, people that remind me of myself will be equally successful. Therefore, I'll pick them as my mentees around me. If your organization is going through a transformation, what you'll have to do is to make sure that those senior leaders make a thinking slow choice of not picking the young chap that reminds them the most of them, but picking the person that the organization wants to see as a future leader. So if you indeed are going through a situation where your strategy has changed, also think about your leadership model one more time. Because very different behaviors can lead to the same outcome. And you as an organization might be biased to a certain way of doing things. Just reflect and ask yourself if this is the outcome I would like to see, or if this is the strength I'd like my leaders to develop. How would it look differently between the way that a man does it, a woman does it, an introvert does it, an extrovert does it? So when you have people discussions in the room, there should be someone who is really skilled on the topic of unconscious bias, who can then ask the challenging question. And would you have said the same thing if the person would have been a woman or a man, or if the person would have been from this or that geography? So someone who's truly skilled and who can point out behaviors in the group that otherwise would not have been surfaced.
Let's look at how we think. Conscious thinking is based on analysis and reasoning, which seeks to break down issues into their component parts, main factors, and effects. All possible sources of information are considered and evaluated in order to ensure an unbiased perspective. We can use tools to assist with our analysis, and it is a skill that we can develop and become increasingly aware of. The disadvantage is it can be difficult and is time-consuming. And non-conscious thinking is based on intuition and experience. It is the ability to acquire knowledge without proof or evidence or conscious reasoning, or without understanding how the knowledge was acquired. In other words, it's our gut instinct, formed from previous events that have shaped our thinking. The disadvantage is that this is not always accurate and is often flawed. The line indicates the percentage of our brain that is non-conscious versus conscious thinking, and has been argued by some academics to be a staggering 95% of our thinking is non-conscious. This is why we must ensure we apply critical thinking at all times and evaluate the assumptions we are making. It's not that it's wrong to think like this, we have no choice. This is just simply how our brains work. When we are making decisions or solving problems, we have two alternative approaches which we can take. They are divergent and convergent. Divergent thinking, also referred to as lateral thinking, is the process of creating multiple ideas or solutions related to a problem that you are trying to solve. Divergent thinking is brainstorming and involves coming up with many different ideas to solve a single problem. The process of divergent thinking is spontaneous and free-flowing, unlike convergent thinking, which is more systematic. The process of convergent thinking involves applying logical steps in order to come up with the single best solution to a problem. Divergent thinking works best for open-ended problems and involves creativity. Convergent thinking is useful in situations when there is a single best correct answer and the answer can be discovered through analysing available stored information. Thinking fast and slow refers to a dichotomy between two modes of thought. System 1 is fast, instinctive and emotional, whereas System 2 is slower, more deliberate and more logical. Our fast thinking, although often necessary, for example when we instinctively need to avoid danger, can often be full of biases from our experiences. It is the slow thinking that can assist us with limiting these biases. You will practice these in activity 2. And of course, emotions affect all our decisions. Emotions are created when the brain interprets what's going on around us through our memories, thoughts and beliefs. This triggers how we feel and behave. Emotions can affect not just the nature of the decision, but the speed at which you make it. Anger can lead to impatience and rash decision making. We must consider how our emotions have shaped the decisions we have made. Activity 2. Watch the following clip and either discuss amongst yourselves or conduct as an individual activity and decide what is the most important aspect to critical thinking.
Listen to the rhythms of our slanted voices. Listen. Listen.
Watch the following clip and discuss an example of a cognitive bias. You will be presented with a bias and given an example of what that bias is. I suggest that you break into groups or work as individuals and change the example to something related to what you do on a daily basis. Again, watch the following clip and discuss examples of logical fallacies. As with the previous exercise, you'll be presented with a fallacy and given an example of it. Use this opportunity to discuss amongst yourselves whether or not you've noticed these amongst your group. Don't be afraid to point out where people have used biases or logical fallacies. After all, the whole point of doing this workshop is so that we can learn from one another. In summary, what is critical thinking? Well, in my view, to put it in its shortest sense, it's about questioning everything. If you want to find out more about this, then please go to our doctrine, understanding and decision making that provide you with good examples on cognitive biases and fallacies. But just to summarize what we've gone through today, I believe that critical thinking is about being skeptical but not cynical, and this is healthy and should be encouraged amongst your subordinates. It will lead to open-minded and unbiased analysis where possible. The better at critical thinking you are, the less biased you will be and the more aware of your biases you will become. This will lead to rigorous evaluation of arguments and explanations and predictions, which will lead you to develop and test your own hypotheses. And it could result in creative and lateral thinking, exploring all alternatives and coming up with new solutions. But importantly, it will also help you to develop constructing compelling and persuasive arguments. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast on critical thinking, and please remember that we must apply thought to how we think.